Man learned to silence their emotional needs. When parents are emotionally distant, children don't stop having needs. They stop expressing them. The nervous system quickly learns that reaching out doesn't lead to comfort, understanding, or warmth. Over time, the child adapts by becoming quieter inside, minimizing feelings before they can be rejected. This pattern is not conscious. It is regulation. Emotional distance teaches the body that needing is unsafe, so emotions are held internally, often without words. As adults, this shows up as difficulty asking for help, discomfort with vulnerability, or a belief that emotions should be handled alone. Mental health struggles often begin here, not because emotions are too strong, but because they were never mirrored or received. The nervous system learned to self-contain rather than co-regulate. What was left behind is not emotional weakness. It is emotional compression. 2. Love becomes conditional instead of secure. In emotionally distant homes, affection is often inconsistent or tied to behavior. Praise may come through achievement, obedience, or usefulness rather than emotional presence. The child learns that love must be earned. This creates lifelong self-monitoring. The nervous system stays alert, tracking how to be acceptable. Self-worth becomes externalized, dependent on performance rather than inherent value. Over time, this pattern leads to anxiety, perfectionism, or emotional exhaustion. As an adult, you may feel driven to prove your worth, yet never fully satisfied. The body never rests because love never felt unconditional. What emotionally distant parents leave behind is not ambition. It is uncertainty about being loved without effort. 3. Hyper-independence replaces emotional safety. When emotional support is unavailable, children learn to rely on themselves. This can look like maturity, responsibility, or resilience, but underneath it is adaptation to absence. The nervous system stops expecting support and organizes around self-sufficiency. Asking for help feels uncomfortable or shameful. Depending on others feels risky. Hyper-independence is often praised, but it carries a cost. Emotional regulation becomes harder because co-regulation was never modeled. Relationships may feel draining or unsafe because closeness was never a source of comfort. Mental health struggles arise not from independence itself, but from doing everything alone. What was left behind is not strength alone. It is the burden of carrying life without support. 4. Intimacy feels confusing or overwhelming. Emotionally distant parenting often leaves adults unsure how closeness is supposed to feel. Intimacy may trigger discomfort, numbness, or anxiety. The nervous system associates closeness with unpredictability rather than safety. You may crave connection while simultaneously pulling away. You may feel uncomfortable being seen emotionally. You may struggle to trust warmth. These responses are not avoidance, they are memory. The body remembers that closeness did not feel regulating, so it stays cautious. Even in healthy relationships, attachment becomes complicated because safety was never consistently paired with connection. What emotionally distant parents leave behind is not lack of love. It is confusion about how love is supposed to feel in the body. 5. Self-worth grows fragile and externally referenced. Without emotional attunement, children do not develop stable internal validation. Their feelings were not named, reflected, or soothed. As adults, they may look outward for confirmation of worth. Praise feels necessary but insufficient. Criticism feels devastating. The nervous system remains sensitive to feedback because identity was never securely rooted. Mental health struggles such as anxiety, shame, or chronic self-doubt often trace back to this gap. Not because parents were malicious, but because emotional presence was missing. What was left behind is not emptiness. It is a longing to be seen without explanation. 6. Healing begins when emotional absence is finally acknowledged. What emotionally distant parents leave behind often becomes lighter only when it is named without minimizing or blaming. When you acknowledge that something essential was missing, the nervous system no longer has to protect the truth by staying guarded. What once felt like confusion begins to make sense. You realize that many of your patterns were not flaws, but adaptations to emotional absence. This recognition allows compassion to replace self-criticism. You stop asking why closeness feels hard or why independence feels compulsory. The body understands that it learned to survive without emotional presence, not because it wanted to, but because it had to. As this understanding settles, emotional regulation improves. You begin offering yourself the attunement that was not available early on. Healing does not require confronting or condemning your parents. It requires honoring your experience honestly. When absence is acknowledged, the nervous system relaxes its grip on old defenses. Space opens for gentler connection, safer intimacy, and a more stable sense of self-worth. This content is for educational and reflective purposes only. It is based on real-life experiences and personal growth journeys, shared to invite awareness, not conclusions. We encourage kind, respectful discussion and constructive comments. In the next reflection, growing up with parents who were there, but not present, we will explore how physical presence without emotional attunement shapes identity, attachment, and the quiet loneliness many people carry into adulthood.